The champagne glass caught the light as William Thompson III raised a high, his voice booming across the glittering ballroom. "If she can waltz, I'll marry my son to her," he sneered, his words slicing through the air like a blade. Every guest turned at once toward the young black woman frozen by the marble floor, shards of crystal scattered around her feet. The room fell deathly silent. Kesha Williams, 35, a contract cleaner barely 3 weeks into the job, kept her eyes on the broken glass, her trembling hands carefully gathering each piece. "Dad, enough," muttered Jonathan Thompson, 28, his face flushed with embarrassment. But William, the intoxicated billionaire host, wasn't listening. He was too drunk on whiskey and power to stop. "Play a waltz." William roared, staggering toward the center of the room as if conducting a trial. "If she dances better than my wife, I'll marry my son to her on the spot." Just imagine, the heir to the Thompson fortune marrying the cleaning lady. Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and eager. Women covered their mouths in mock horror. The men smirked, pretending this was all harmless fun. Kesha rose slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at William with an unreadable expression, calm and steady, the kind of look that made people uneasy without knowing why. "I accept," she said clearly. The room froze. Even the orchestra went silent. William blinked, certain he'd misheard. "What did you say?" "I accept your challenge," Kesha repeated, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "And when I outdance your wife, you'll keep your word, even if you were joking." Mocking laughter erupted again. No one noticed the flicker in Kesha's eyes, the same spark that had once lit up the world's greatest stages before everything shattered in one tragic night. Victoria Thompson, 50, glided forward, elegant and dripping with disdain. Known for teaching Manhattan's elite the art of ballroom dance, she tilted her head with a smirk. "Darling, you can't be serious. Competing with this?" she said, flicking her wrist toward Kesha. "Come on, Victoria," William said with a grin. "You won the Club Waltz trophy last year. Show her how it's done." Kesha stayed quiet, her thoughts spinning back 15 years, to when she was Kesha Morrow, principal dancer with the American National Ballet. Standing ovations. Glowing reviews calling her the next legend. Then the accident. 3 months in a coma. Doctors saying she'd be lucky to walk again, let alone dance. Now, standing in the ballroom of the man mocking her, she felt the weight of it all pressing down. "Jonathan," William called, turning to his son. "Get the camera. This will be one for the history books. The day a cleaning lady thought she was a dancer." Jonathan hesitated, clearly uneasy. He didn't know it yet, but this night was about to turn into something none of them would ever forget. "Dad, this is insane." "She was just doing her job," Jonathan said sharply. William shot him a mocking look. "She accepted the challenge, didn't she? Now she's going to put on a show for us all. Or would you rather I tell your girlfriend about that little incident last week?" Jonathan's face drained of color. Kesha caught the exchange instantly. Blackmail. Another glimpse of the control William Thompson wielded over everyone in his orbit. Music. William barked at the DJ. "And place your bets. 500 on my wife winning. 1,000 if anyone's bold enough to bet on the cleaning lady." Cruel laughter filled the air as guests eagerly pulled out their wallets, treating the entire thing like a circus act. Victoria stepped into the center of the dance floor, stretching theatrically to flaunt her experience. William strolled over to Kesha, a wicked grin twisting his face. "When you lose, and you will, you'll drop to your knees, apologize for wasting everyone's time, and then you're fired. Simple as that." Something shifted in Kesha's eyes right then. A glint of the same fire that had carried her across the world's grandest stages, that had pushed her through endless months of physical therapy just to walk again, that had kept her dignity intact when everything else had been stripped away. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, but with a calm that froze the room, "when I win, and I will, I expect you to keep your word about the marriage. But I want more than that." William smirked, amused. "Oh, she has demands now. Go on then. What else could you possibly want?" "I want you," Kesha said clearly, "to admit in front of all these people that you judged a woman solely by her job and her skin. And I want a public apology." The room went tense. Conversations hushed. People exchanged stunned glances. Realizing this had just taken a turn none of them expected. William laughed, loud and dismissive. You've got guts. Fine. But when you embarrass yourself out there, you'll leave here without a job and without a shred of pride. What William didn't know was that he wasn't facing just a cleaning lady with a mysterious past. He was facing someone who had lost everything once and clawed her way back. Someone who knew what it meant to fight for respect in a world that had already written her off. Victoria practiced her polished ballroom steps, confident and composed. Kesha stood quietly in the corner, her face unreadable, but inside, years of pain and resilience churned like a storm. 15 years of rehab. 15 years of learning to walk again, of accepting a body that would never move the same way. That kind of fight forged strength the wealthy onlookers could never understand. Look at her, one guest whispered. She's probably never even danced before. This is humiliating. William strutted around collecting bets like a king surveying his kingdom. 500 says she can't last one song, he announced. 8,000 says she bolts halfway through. Laughter roared again. But Kesha noticed something William didn't. Jonathan wasn't laughing at all. Jonathan stood near the wall, his expression tight with unease, clearly wishing the whole circus would end. That's when Kesha noticed something about him. It wasn't the first time she'd seen that face. 3 weeks ago, when she started working these events, she'd spotted the same young man treating the staff with kindness while the rest of the executives barely looked their way. It had been him. Miss, came a quiet voice beside her. Kesha turned to see a man in his 60s, wearing the discreet uniform of the building's security team. I'm Marcus, head of security, he murmured while pretending to check his radio. I saw you dance before, 15 years ago. National Theater. Kesha Maroro, principal soloist. I was on security detail back then too. Kesha's heart thudded. After years of hiding behind ordinary jobs, someone finally recognized her. I thought you didn't make it after the accident, Marcus whispered, his eyes a mix of awe and disbelief. The papers said you'd never dance again. The paper said plenty, Kesha replied softly. Not all of it true. Marcus nodded slowly. What they did to you back then was wrong. And what they're doing now, his eyes flicked toward William, still laughing as if he owned the world. This is worse. It was in that moment Kesha made a choice she had avoided for 15 years, not just about dancing again, but about reclaiming her identity. Marcus, she said firmly, I need a favor. When I dance tonight, no matter what happens, I want you to film the reactions. Every single one. He frowned but nodded. I will. But why? Because, Kesha said, allowing herself the faintest smile. Some people need to be reminded that underestimating someone can cost them more than they can afford. Meanwhile, William was determined to make the humiliation sting. Let's raise the stakes, he bellowed. If she finishes the song without falling or stopping, I'll give her $1,000. But when she fails, and she cleans this entire room on her knees. The room erupted in mixed reactions. Some laughed, others shifted uncomfortably. A few guests were starting to sense this was crossing a line, but no one dared stand up to William Thompson III. Dad, Jonathan tried again, voice tight, this isn't right. Quiet, Jonathan, William snapped. This is the real world. There's a natural order, and people like her, he jabbed a finger at Kesha, need to know their place. Kesha finally moved, not toward the center, but slowly, methodically, beginning a series of subtle stretches. To the untrained eye, they looked like casual movements. But Marcus knew better. He'd seen these exact warm-ups before every major performance at the National Theater. She's really going to do it, Marcus muttered under his breath. Sensing the attention slipping from herself, Victoria stepped forward. Start the music, she commanded, eager to reclaim the spotlight. The DJ, visibly uncomfortable, queued up a classical waltz. Victoria launched into her routine, elegant, polished, but stiff and predictable. Years of private lessons at elite clubs had given her confidence, but none of the artistry. Still, the crowd offered polite applause, unaware that the real performance hadn't even begun. To that audience, Victoria represented everything they thought belonged on that stage. Wealth, privilege, all the right schools and social circles. William clapped with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Well done, darling," he said loudly. "Now let's bring out our guest performer." Kesha walked to the center of the floor with slow, steady steps. There was no trace of defeat in her posture. If anything, the quiet dignity radiating from her made several guests shift uneasily in their seats. "What song would you like?" the DJ asked, more out of habit than respect. "The same one," Kesha answered calmly. "Oh, she wants a second chance," William chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. "Perfect. Play it from the start. Let's see how long she lasts before she quits." But none of them knew Kesha had chosen that waltz for a reason. She had danced it hundreds of times in her career. It lived in her bones. It was the piece she performed on the night she earned a 5-minute standing ovation at the National Theater, a performance critics called one of the most breathtaking in American dance history. As the room waited, Kesha closed her eyes and drifted back 15 years. She remembered the rush of soaring across the stage, the way every note of music felt stitched to her soul, the absolute certainty that she had been born for this. Then came the accident. Doctors said she'd never dance again. The media declared her career finished. For years, she believed them. Until she didn't. Until she clawed her way back, slowly, painfully, rebuilding her strength in secret. She never returned to the stage. But she never stopped dancing alone when life felt too heavy to carry. The music began. And in that hall filled with arrogance and smug laughter, something shifted. Kesha lifted her arms, each movement precise, deliberate. A few of the musicians exchanged glances. They recognized it instantly. This wasn't some random amateur fumbling through steps. This was discipline, training, artistry. The first few notes of the waltz wrapped around the room as Kesha began to dance, not with the clumsy, hesitant steps everyone expected, but with a grace so effortless it felt like the laws of gravity had bent to her will. At first, she held back, her movements soft, almost restrained, letting the audience keep their low expectations. Then the music swelled, and she unleashed everything. Each turn snapped with perfect control. Each leap carried her through the air with a weightlessness that stole the breath from the room. She spun through a series of flawless pirouettes, then launched into a soaring grand jeté that drew a collective gasp. This wasn't ballroom dance. This was world-class ballet, seamlessly woven into the waltz's rhythm, and it was extraordinary. William Thompson stopped laughing. Victoria's smile faded. One by one, the guests leaned forward, realizing they weren't watching a cleaning lady performing a stunt. They were witnessing a legend reclaim her crown. "My God," someone whispered, voice trembling. She's extraordinary." Near the wall, Marcus kept his promise, recording every second, not just Kesha's performance, but the faces in the crowd, especially William's. His expression had shifted from smug amusement to confusion, then to something much closer to fear. William's voice cracked as he muttered under his breath, This can't be real. Who the hell is this woman?" But reality hit harder when Kesha launched into the signature sequence that had once made her a legend, a breathtaking blend of classical precision and her own innovative style. A woman in the crowd, a devoted patron of the arts, suddenly gasped, "Wait, I know those moves. I've seen that routine before. But where?" Jonathan Thompson couldn't look away, his phone capturing every second. Unlike his father, he didn't need status or titles to recognize raw genius. Then the music soared, and Kesha unleashed a series of flawless fouettes, spinning again and again on a single leg with a speed and control that left the entire hall frozen. The technique required years of training, incredible strength, and an artistry that few in the world ever achieved. The music ended. Kesha stood tall, arms extended, head lifted high. Power and grace radiated from her as if she had claimed the room itself. Her breathing was steady, her composure unshaken. For a moment, silence. A silence so heavy it felt like time itself had stopped. Then one clap, another, and suddenly, the entire room erupted into thunderous applause. Cheers of bravo and extraordinary rang out, shaking the windows. William Thompson stood pale and shaken. The man who prided himself on control had been publicly humiliated by someone he dismissed as nothing. Worse, Manhattan's elite were now staring at him with thinly veiled disgust. That's when Marcus stepped forward, still filming. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the hall, "meet Kesha Morrow, former principal soloist of the American National Ballet." The name detonated like a bomb. Gasps. Shocked whispers. People recalling headlines from years ago. A dancer who vanished after a devastating accident at the peak of her fame. "Impossible," Victoria Thompson stuttered. Kesha Morrow, she was gone. She never danced again. Kesha finally spoke, calm but sharp. "Clearly, the rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated." Laughter rippled through the room. Everyone except William, who looked like the ground had just given way beneath him. He had mocked a legend. On camera, Marcus twisted the knife. "Mr. Thompson," he said, lifting his phone, "you promised on record that if she outdanced your wife, you'd marry her to your son. I think this audience can agree she more than met the challenge." Jonathan, clearly mortified, stepped forward. "Miss Morrow," he said, "I want to apologize for my father's behavior. It was shameful." "Jonathan, shut up." William snapped, losing every shred of composure. "You will not apologize to her." Kesha turned to him slowly, her smile carrying the weight of victory. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "I believe we have a marriage proposal to discuss. A man of your standing wouldn't break his word, would he?" The room fell silent again. This was no longer about dance. It was about power, pride, and payback. "You must be out of your mind if you think I'll honor some drunken bet," William growled, his voice trembling with rage. "Ah," Kesha said smoothly, "but it wasn't just a joke, was it? Marcus, play the recording." And with that, Marcus hit play, filling the room with William's own words, every arrogant condition, every humiliating demand, every promise he had made for all to hear. The recording played on, crystal clear for everyone to hear. "And here he is confirming the terms," Marcus's voice said, even after I reminded him he'd have to keep his word. The crowd rippled with murmurs. Some people chuckled in disbelief. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing just how badly William had cornered himself. "That's blackmail," William snapped, his composure finally shattering. "No," Kesha said smoothly, her voice carrying like a blade through the tension. "This is called accountability. You made a public promise in front of 200 witnesses. Now it's time to prove whether your word means anything, or if your pride is worth more than your honor." Jonathan stepped toward her, calm but firm. "Miss Morrow," he said, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to honor my father's word. Not because I have to, but because any man should be proud to stand beside someone with your courage and talent." The room erupted in whispers. Nobody had expected this turn. William's face went crimson. "Jonathan, if you go through with this, you're out. Out of the company, out of the family, out of everything." "Then so be it," Jonathan said evenly, extending his hand to Kesha. "Some things matter more than money, Dad. Like integrity." Kesha's gaze swept from the hand to the stunned audience and finally to William, who now looked like a man unraveling in real time. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone steady but edged with fire, 15 years ago, people like you decided I had no worth after I was no longer perfect. Tonight, you tried to humiliate me because of my skin, my past, and the way I survive. But here's what I've learned. Real class doesn't come from wealth or last names. It comes from how you treat people when you think no one's watching." She looked back at Jonathan. "Your son seems to understand that, even if you don't. As for the proposal," she smiled faintly, "I'll accept dinner with him. But marriage? That's something two people choose for themselves, out of love and respect, not because of some humiliating bet." The room exploded with applause, louder than before, this time for Kesha's grace and dignity. William, shaking with fury and shame, muttered something about lawyers before storming out. Victoria followed, her face pale with embarrassment. Marcus ended the recording and grinned at Kesha. "Oh, this is going to set the internet on fire." And he was right. By the next morning, Millionaire humiliates legendary ballerina had taken over social media, racking up millions of views and furious comments. William woke up to disaster. $3 million in contracts gone overnight, business partners demanding an emergency meeting, and Victoria refusing to leave their bedroom, mortified by the scandal. Jonathan found him slumped in his office, surrounded by newspapers screaming his downfall. "Dad," he said quietly, "the board has voted. You have 1 hour to resign, or you'll be removed." For the first time, William looked at his son and saw not fear, but defiance. "You did this," he muttered bitterly. "You betrayed me." "No," Jonathan said evenly. "You betrayed yourself the moment you decided arrogance mattered more than decency." While William's empire began to crumble, Kesha's world was exploding with opportunity. 3 major international ballet companies wanted her to choreograph exclusive performances. Lincoln Center called, offering a solo event. Hollywood producers reached out about turning her story into a film. But the offer that touched her most didn't come from the powerful or the famous. It came from the children at the community school where she used to teach. They pooled together their savings, just $23, and offered it to her as a scholarship so she could come back to teaching. "I'll take it," Kesha said, eyes brimming with tears. "But let's turn this into something bigger." 6 months later, the Kesha Morrow Center for the Arts opened in the heart of Manhattan, funded by donations pouring in from around the world after her story went viral. Jonathan, now running a completely reimagined version of the family business built on social responsibility, became the first major donor. William Thompson, once the king of his own empire, lost everything: his company, his reputation, even his family. Victoria filed for divorce and left for Europe. Reports claimed he was last seen working as a low-level consultant at a small firm, a broken echo of the man who once thought wealth gave him the right to humiliate others. "You know what amazes me most?" Marcus said at the center's opening, watching Kesha teach a class full of smiling, eager children. This wasn't just a victory over prejudice. It was proof that real greatness answers cruelty with dignity. Kesha, now celebrated again as one of the finest artists of her generation, watched her students take their first ballet steps. "Sometimes," she said softly, "you have to lose everything to discover who you really are. And sometimes people have to lose everything to realize who they never should have been." Jonathan walked up, carrying flowers from the garden he'd planted around the center himself. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, holding out his arm. "Ready," she said, accepting not just his arm, but the new life she had built on the ruins of the old one. Kesha's greatest revenge wasn't destroying William Thompson. It was creating something so beautiful, so lasting, that his cruelty became irrelevant. She showed the world that when you answer prejudice with grace and hatred with brilliance, you don't just win, you change everything.